Canada, what they've done to our dairy farm workers is a disgrace.
Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. Canada is very tough. Canada is very, we're not treated well by Canada.
When Donald Trump launched his sweeping tariff plan under the America First banner, the promise was simple: protect U.S. industries and bring jobs home. Yet one sector that now finds itself at the crossroads is dairy. This industry is more than a symbol of American farming. It generates over $50 billion in value each year and supports hundreds of thousands of jobs across Wisconsin, California, New York, and beyond. For many rural communities, milk, butter, and cheese are the backbone of livelihoods. Exports are vital to keeping this system in balance. The United States cannot consume everything it produces, which makes international sales critical for farm income. Mexico and Canada consistently rank as the top two buyers of American dairy products. But as Trump escalates tariff battles across the globe, the very policies designed to shield U.S. producers are now placing these crucial markets at risk.
At first glance, dairy has not been directly hit by new U.S. tariffs. The duties were aimed at steel, aluminum, copper, semiconductors, and a wide range of imported goods. Yet trade does not operate in silos. When Washington raises barriers, partners often look for ways to push back. That is where the risk begins for dairy. Mexico and Canada together accounted for nearly $3.7 billion in U.S. dairy purchases in 2024, according to USDA data. These flows remain intact, but the political climate is shifting. In 2018, Mexico placed tariffs on American cheese in retaliation for U.S. steel duties, and this year Mexican officials again listed dairy among products that could be considered if talks collapsed. Canada, for its part, has long defended its supply management system for milk, eggs, and poultry. Even after Ottawa suspended some retaliatory tariffs in September 2025 to keep dialogue alive, it held firm on protecting its dairy quotas. Ongoing talks reflect this tension. Mexico is currently in a 90-day pause, a window granted to prevent immediate escalation, but agriculture remains on the table if Washington increases pressure. Canada has reopened lines of communication, yet Prime Minister Mark Carney signaled that Ottawa will not dismantle its dairy framework. In this climate, American milk and cheese exports risk becoming bargaining chips. While not yet reality, the possibility of new barriers lingers over every shipment.
Welcome back. Canada is looking to boost trade with other North American trading partners, namely Mexico, as both countries try to work out a trade agreement with the volatile U.S. under President Trump.
Imagine for a moment what happens if both neighbors do choose retaliation. This is a what-if scenario, not current policy, but the numbers show how vulnerable the U.S. dairy industry could be. Based on USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, U.S. dairy exports to Mexico were about $2.5 billion in 2024, with Canada at roughly $1.2 billion. Together, that is $3.7 billion of trade. If new duties of 10% were imposed, imports could fall by 6 to 10%, erasing around $300 million in sales. At 25%, losses could rise towards $700 million. At 50%, the hit might reach $1.5 billion, wiping out a large share of annual growth. The impact would not be equal across products. Cheese, one of the fastest-growing export categories, would be first in the line of fire. Mexico is America's top buyer of cheese, but Europe and New Zealand stand ready to fill gaps if prices climb. In Canada, where U.S. access is already limited by tariff rate quotas, additional retaliation would simply squeeze an already narrow opening. For farmers in Wisconsin or California, this would mean fewer markets and shrinking margins, while competitors abroad gain ground. The paradox is clear. Trump's tariffs were meant to defend American industries, but they risk turning U.S. dairy farmers into collateral damage. Canada has responded with strategic patience. Mexico is using talks as leverage. And both neighbors hold tools that could restrict American milk, butter, and cheese. For now, dairy remains outside the direct line of fire, yet it sits in a fragile position, one political decision away from being targeted. If even dairy, long seen as the heart of American farming, becomes a casualty of this trade war, it raises a difficult question. Are these tariffs truly protecting American agriculture, or are they beginning to bite back at home?
Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Europe tonight, hoping to build trade and defense cooperation with key allies. Canada has pivoted across the pond as tensions simmer with our southern neighbor.
The relationship between the United States and Canada has rarely felt so unsettled. President Donald Trump has used tariffs as his favorite instrument of pressure, reshaping the way America interacts with its closest neighbors. In Washington, the tone has been sharp, focused on extracting concessions through surprise measures and tough rhetoric. North of the border, Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a different path. Rather than respond with fire against fire, he is building a strategy centered on patience, alliances, and long-term leverage. The question facing both countries is not just about tariffs today. It is about whether Canada can hold its ground while reshaping its future beyond America's shadow.
Prime Minister Carney announcing yesterday that Canada will be dropping some countermeasures on American goods.
In terms of the strategy here, it's probably a smart play for Canada to really underscore the importance and the value of CUSMA.
Carney's most recent move was to scale back many of Canada's retaliatory tariffs on American goods. The change will be visible on supermarket shelves, where Canadian families may see lower prices on everyday products like fruit juice and food staples. Canadian manufacturers that rely on U.S. components will also feel some relief. On the surface, this might look like a concession, but in reality, it is a deliberate gesture designed to highlight the value of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. Roughly 85 to 90% of Canadian exports to the United States already travel tariff-free under that pact. By removing countermeasures on CUSMA-covered goods, Carney is showing that Canada respects the deal and expects Washington to do the same.
So as we work to address outstanding trade issues with the United States, it's important, it's vital. We do everything we can to preserve this unique advantage for Canadian workers, Canadian businesses.
The real sticking points remain in metals and autos. The United States continues to apply tariffs of up to 50% on steel, aluminum, and copper, citing national security provisions. Canada has kept some retaliatory measures in place on those products. This mix of relief and resistance is intentional. It demonstrates goodwill without abandoning leverage, and it signals that Canada is ready to negotiate seriously on the areas that matter most. Instead of bending, Carney is pacing the talks and ensuring that Canada sets terms of engagement rather than reacting blindly to every move from Washington.
As the trade war with the United States continues, Carney has been focused on diversifying trade, especially with Europe. Canada's energy and critical minerals are top of the pitch list.
Carney's approach is not limited to North America. While discussions with the Trump administration continue, he has crossed the Atlantic to strengthen ties with Europe. His itinerary includes meetings with leaders in Germany, Poland, and Latvia, alongside sessions with major business executives. Canada's pitch is clear. It can be a reliable supplier of energy and critical minerals at a time when European governments are anxious about secure supply chains. This European push comes at a sensitive moment. The European Union only recently accepted a tariff framework with the United States that set a 15% baseline on many goods, while higher duties remained on steel and aluminum. Canada is watching that experience closely. By stepping in with offers of energy, minerals, and defense cooperation, Ottawa is positioning itself as an attractive partner, just as Europe seeks alternatives to U.S. pressure. The presence of Canadian troops in Poland and Latvia under Operation Reassurance also reinforces Canada's credibility as both a security and economic partner. What might look like a simple trade mission is in fact a statement of independence. Canada is diversifying its options and making clear that it will not be cornered.
The contrast between Washington and Ottawa is clear. Trump thrives on confrontation, using tariffs to unsettle allies. His method creates urgency and seeks fast concessions. Carney is shaping a slower game. He lowers costs at home, keeps leverage, and builds partnerships abroad. The strategy may not grab headlines like Trump's moves, but it builds resilience. For Canada, this is not about bowing to American power. It is about proving that a middle power with the right resources and alliances can withstand turbulence and turn it into strength. The coming months will test both leaders. Trump will push through tariffs and deadlines. Carney will counter with alliances and economic cards. Canada is not reacting anymore. It is standing tall, steering its own path, and reminding the world its choices matter.
The headline here is Trump expands 50% steel and aluminum tariffs to include 407 additional product.
I got a problem with that guy. He's signing all these forms, Cleveland Cliffs.
President Donald Trump has once again expanded his trade war. The White House confirmed that tariffs of 50% on steel and aluminum now cover hundreds of additional products. What began with raw materials now includes car parts, refrigerators, baby strollers, even the aluminum in soda cans. For American families, this means higher grocery bills and more expensive cars. For U.S. partners like Canada, it disrupts exports that depend on metal packaging and industrial inputs.
And why doesn't he just stay in the U.S.? Because I'm done with this guy signing letters saying, yeah, bring all the steel down to the U.S., tariff the crap out of Canadians.
This is not just a technical trade measure. It is a shock that links everyday costs with international trade tensions. Let's take a closer look at what this expansion means inside the United States and across North America.
The Trump administration is quietly making it even more expensive to import hundreds of items that all of us would see on store shelves. Well, a whole bunch of household items impacted, and some industrial items too. Look at this: cranes, bulldozers, wind turbines, rail cars.
For consumers, the most immediate effect is inflation. CNN's reporting highlighted that import prices rose sharply in July, defying the White House claim that foreign exporters would absorb the tariffs. Analysts such as Pantheon Economics stress that American businesses and households are carrying nearly all of the cost. That cost is not small. Supply chain experts have estimated that the expanded tariff list now covers around $320 billion of products, creating roughly $160 billion in extra expenses that flow directly into the economy. Industries tied to steel and aluminum are already reacting. Farmers and builders depend on tractors, gearboxes, pumps, and construction machinery now hit by higher tariffs. Legacy manufacturer John Deere recently announced layoffs at 3 Midwestern facilities, citing weaker sales and the impact of tariffs on production costs. When major employers respond this way, the shock spreads into local communities. The administration's stated goal is to rebuild American steel and aluminum. Yet investment in those sectors requires billions of dollars and long-term certainty. The process so far has been anything but certain. Economists describe it as a policy direction that may be defensible in theory but clumsy in execution. This uncertainty, now often called Trumpian uncertainty, discourages companies from expanding or hiring because tariff rules can change with little warning.
We aren't going to roll over. We aren't going to kiss his backside. We're going to fight like we've never fought before.
Trump's tariff expansion has not gone unanswered. Canada, America's closest trading partner, has pushed back on 2 tracks. At the public level, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has taken direct aim at Washington. He calls the tariffs a hidden tax on American families, noting that Canada buys more than $350 billion of U.S. goods each year. Ford announced a $70 million Canadian program to support workers, pressed Ottawa to tighten quotas on cheap steel, and made it clear Canada will not roll over. On the federal track, Prime Minister Mark Carney has chosen strategic patience. He has directed aid to sectors such as lumber and agriculture while keeping negotiations with Washington open. His government insists Canada will only accept a fair deal, not a short-term fix that weakens national interests. Ford and Carney show 2 sides of one response. Other provinces have also voiced strong opposition, while unions, industries, and policymakers align behind the same message. Canada is standing firm, defending its workers and industries, and refusing to be cornered into a bad deal. The expansion of steel and aluminum tariffs is more than a policy adjustment. For Americans, it means higher prices when inflation is already a concern. For businesses, it adds uncertainty that discourages long-term investment. For Canada, the answer has been resilience. Ottawa and the provinces are backing workers and reinforcing supply chains, sending a message that they will not accept a bad deal. Trump's strategy may unsettle markets, but it also reveals which partners are prepared to stand firm. The coming months will show whether these tariffs strengthen industry or simply confirm that trade wars rarely produce clear winners.